Leave her. She won't last the night.
No one should be left for the dust.
Please, I don't want to die here. Why'd you help me, stranger?
'Cause someone once pulled me from the dirt too. Hold tight. We ride toward the light now.
The sun bled low over the desert, painting the land in dying gold. Heat shimmered off the hardpan, the wind whispering dry secrets through brittle sage. A lone rider descended from the high ridge, slow, deliberate, his shadow long across the dust. Eli Carradine rode like a man used to silence, reins loose in one gloved hand, the other resting on the worn stock of a Winchester that hadn't spoken in years. His coat was dust gray, his face drawn by sun and memory. To most, he was just another drifter passing through nowhere, but the way he looked at the land, like he'd buried something in it, told another story. He'd been riding 3 days down from the high country, away from snowmelt creeks and pine shadows, chasing no one and nothing. But sometimes the road has plans of its own. The wind shifted, dry and bitter, carrying something faint beneath the dust and sage. Not scent but sound. A weak, broken noise that didn't belong in all that emptiness. Eli drew his horse to a stop, head cocked. The wind came again. A sound like a cry, faint, human. He turned his horse toward it without thinking. A quiet man's instincts were sharper than most. He'd lived long enough to trust them. The tracks were shallow, small, not made by boots meant for long travel. He followed them down a shallow draw where the light faded early. And there, half covered in wind-blown sand, lay a child. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 12. Her hair was matted, her face burned raw by sun and grit. One arm stretched limply toward a cracked wooden cross half buried beside her. For a moment, Eli thought she was gone. Then her fingers twitched. Just once. A small motion against the vast indifference of the desert. He swung down from the saddle, knees creaking, and crouched beside her. Her lips were split, her breath thin and raspy. There was no canteen, no horse, no prints around her but her own small steps leading from nowhere. The kind of nowhere people don't come back from. "Easy, little one," he murmured, voice rough from days without use. He slipped his canteen from the saddle and held it to her lips. Water spilled down her chin before she managed to swallow. Her eyelids fluttered, and for the briefest instant, gray eyes opened, startled, clouded, lost. He lifted her gently, feeling how weightless she was, how every bone felt carved of air. When he laid her across his horse, she didn't stir. The wooden cross still rested in her hand, its edges worn smooth by years of holding. He pried it loose only to tie it around her neck with a strip of cloth, something in him refusing to take even that comfort from her. Eli glanced toward the horizon. The sun had fallen low enough to turn the dust red. He knew of a water hole not far, an old homesteader's well, long abandoned but still trickling. He mounted and turned the horse toward it, moving slow, careful, the girl's head resting against his chest. The desert stretched endless around them, a land that forgave nothing and forgot everything. By the time he reached the well, dusk had folded over the earth like a shroud. Coyotes howled far off, their cries riding the wind between canyon walls. He laid the girl on a blanket beside the water trough and worked by lantern light. He dampened a rag, cleaned her face, coaxed more water into her mouth. Her pulse was weak but steady. He wrapped her in his coat and built a small fire from dry mesquite twigs. The flames caught slow, orange light flickering over her small face. Eli watched her a long while, silent. Something about her didn't sit right, not fear, not danger, just the quiet tug of fate, like the land itself had placed her in his path. He'd seen death enough to know how it usually came, fast, final.
This felt different.
As if she'd been meant to live, though the desert had tried its best to take her.
She stirred near midnight.
A soft whimper barely sound. Her eyes opened again, staring up at the stars. Eli leaned forward, the fire crackling low between them. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you out here." Her lips moved, dry and trembling. "Mama," the word broke halfway through. Then she slipped back under, the whisper carried away by wind.
Eli sat back, jaw tight.
He looked out toward the dark plains where nothing moved but shadow. Somewhere out there, something had left that child to die. And he knew from the way her skin burned, from the bruises under dirt, that it hadn't been the desert alone. He poured coffee from his tin pot, the smell mingling with smoke and dust. His hand trembled slightly when he lifted it. Not from age, from memory. There'd been another time, another life, when he'd failed to save someone small and helpless. The face still haunted him in dreams. Maybe that was why he hadn't ridden past tonight. The horse shifted, ears pricked. Eli rose, rifle in hand. The desert was quiet again, but a quiet too deep, unnatural.
He listened, waited. Nothing.
Only the wind sighing through brush. He lowered the rifle but didn't sleep again. By dawn, the girl had color back in her cheeks. Her breathing stronger. The light caught the edge of the wooden cross at her neck, glinting faintly like it had something to say. Eli saddled up slow, letting her rest, then poured another cup of coffee and stared east where the sun climbed over the mesas. He'd planned to ride north, find work near the mines maybe. But plans had never mattered much to him.
Not since the war.
Not since he'd buried too many good men and one woman whose voice he still heard when it rained. The girl woke at last, blinking against the light. She stared at him, wary, confused. Her voice came hoarse, almost gone. "Where am I?" "Safe," he said simply. "You've been out near a day. Found you on the flats." Her hand went to the cross at her throat, fingers clutching it like it was life itself. "They said they'd come back," she whispered.
"Who?"
Eli asked softly. But she only shook her head, eyes wide, fear flickering behind them like the firelight had the night before.
He didn't press her. Not yet.
There was a look in her eyes he'd seen in his own once, the kind that said words couldn't hold what had happened. He helped her sip more water, tore a piece of bread from his saddlebag, and she ate it slow, like every bite was a battle. The sun was climbing fast, heat already pushing down hard. He packed camp, lifted her gently onto the horse before mounting behind. She leaned into him, too weak to sit straight. They rode south toward the old mission town, a half-day's travel. The land shifted around them, low red canyons giving way to stretches of open salt and shadow. Ravens followed for a time, circling in slow black loops above. Eli felt their eyes like judgment. He didn't like being watched, not by men, not by birds, not by ghosts. Around noon they reached a dry creek where the wind funneled hard between rocks. He stopped to rest the horse and give the girl more water. She hadn't spoken again, but her gaze moved, searching, wary, remembering something she couldn't yet say. Eli crouched beside her. "You got a name, little one?" She hesitated, lips parting. "Clara," she said finally, almost like she wasn't sure. Then softer, "Clara Rose." Eli nodded once. "All right then, Miss Clara Rose. We'll get you to the mission, find a doctor, maybe a meal that don't taste of dust." She gave the faintest nod, but her eyes darted toward the horizon again. Westward. Fear deepened. Eli followed her gaze but saw only shimmering air and distant hills. Whatever she saw in her mind wasn't there, not yet. The creek sang softly in the morning, a silver thread winding through green quiet. Mist curled low over the valley, tender and slow, as if afraid to disturb the wounded silence. Sunlight slanted through cottonwoods, breaking into shards of gold that spilled across the old cabin roof. Inside, the smell of pine smoke mingled with herbs and boiled water. Eli moved quietly, every motion careful, precise, the kind of care that comes from loss. He sat beside the cot, grinding willow bark and sage leaves in a tin bowl with the back of his knife. The mixture turned to a dull green paste under his hand. He dipped a cloth into it, wrung it out, and laid it gently along the girl's burns. Her skin flinched, but her breathing steadied, shallow yet alive. He worked in silence, the rhythm of his actions filling the space where words would have failed anyway. He'd tended gunshot wounds, fevered soldiers, dying horses, but there was something in this stillness that made his hands tremble, though they never showed it. When she stirred, it was small, a hand shifting, the faintest sound of air in her throat. Then her eyes opened. Pale green, too knowing for a child. They caught the morning light like river glass. For a long moment, she only looked at him, seeing but not yet remembering. Her lips parted, dry as the desert he'd found her in.
Water, she whispered.
Eli raised the tin cup and helped her drink, his hand steady, his voice low.
Easy now.
She took one swallow, then another, before her head fell back against the pillow. You're safe here, he said after a moment. Ain't nobody'll harm you now. Her gaze moved around the small cabin, rough-hewn logs darkened by years of smoke, the rifle hanging above the hearth, the carved chair by the window, one tin plate resting on the table. A single man's life, quiet and bare. She looked back at him.
Who are you? Eli, he said.
Just a drifter. She studied him as if weighing the truth of it. Then she nodded faintly. Clara, she murmured, almost to herself. The days came soft at first. Eli spent them chopping wood, mending fences, and boiling herbs while the girl learned to walk again. Her steps were unsteady but stubborn, her spirit stronger than her small frame suggested. She wandered barefoot along the creek bank, tracing the ripples with her fingers, sometimes humming a tune that drifted like a ghost across the water. Eli listened from a distance. He didn't ask about the song, though it stirred something deep, a memory of a lullaby he'd once heard long before gunfire drowned it out. When she spoke, it was rarely about herself. She asked about the land, the animals, the stars. He answered simply, a man who'd learned long ago that truth didn't need many words. Once, as they sat outside near dusk, he asked, "Where were you headed before I found you?" She was quiet for a long time, eyes following the creek as it bent into the pines.
Away, she said finally. He nodded.
Sometimes away's the only place worth goin'. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. That night she hummed her tune again, the one she said her mother used to sing. He watched her by the firelight, the wooden cross still hanging around her neck. He didn't ask about her mother. Some answers lived better in silence. The nights grew cooler, and he noticed she'd started carving bits of wood with his old knife. Small figures of birds, a horse, once even a tiny cabin like his own. When he asked who'd taught her, she said, "Papa used to carve while Mama read scripture. Said a man should make something with his hands every day."
She paused, her voice fading. Before they came. Eli didn't press.
He knew the kind of look that came after men had taken everything. Seen it too often in burned-out towns and faces that never forgot. The quiet around her wasn't emptiness, it was armor. By the 7th morning, the valley was brighter. The air smelled of rain that never fell, and a faint peace had settled over them, the kind that can fool a man into thinking the past won't come back. Eli chopped wood in the yard, the rhythm of axe against log steady as a heartbeat. The sound echoed off canyon walls until, suddenly, he stopped mid-swing. He turned his head slightly.
Listened.
The echo came again, but this time, not from his axe.
Hooves. Distant, steady, moving together. 3, maybe 4 riders.
He straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. Too many for drifters. Too steady for ranch hands. Trouble had a certain rhythm, and he knew it when he heard it. He set down the axe and went to the cabin. The girl sat by the fire, turning one of her wooden carvings in her hands. When she saw his face, the color drained from hers. "What is it?" "Riders," he said.
4 of them.
"Maybe less, maybe more." He reached for the rifle over the hearth and checked the chamber.
Her voice trembled.
"They found me, didn't they?"
He didn't answer.
Just met her eyes, calm and sure, though a storm had started inside him. He took the knife gently from her hands. "Stay inside," he said. She nodded, but her fingers twisted in the fabric of her dress. "Eli," she whispered, voice breaking. "If they ask, don't tell him I'm here." He looked at her for a long moment. "Ain't in the habit of betrayin' those I save." Then he stepped out into the yard, the rifle resting easy in his grip. The sound of hooves grew clearer, dust rising in a distant line across the valley. He could make out dark shapes now, moving slow but sure, cutting the distance with the confidence of men who thought they owned it. Eli walked to the edge of the clearing, boots sinking into soft earth.
He didn't hide.
A man hiding invited suspicion. A man standing firm made others think twice. The riders came into view, 3 of them, rough-coated and armed, their horses lathered from the climb. The lead man wore a deputy's badge, tarnished and old. His face was thin, eyes sharp. The kind that liked giving orders. "Morning," Eli said evenly, voice low but carrying. "Morning," the deputy replied, eyeing him. "We're tracking a runaway. Girl, maybe 12 years old. You seen anything out this way?" Eli let the silence stretch just long enough. "Ain't seen anyone but my own reflection in days." The deputy's horse shifted, hooves crunching dry soil.
"Funny thing, old man.
"We found tracks headin' down this valley 2 nights ago.
Small ones. Looked like a child's.
Came from the flats. Tracks get swallowed fast round here, Eli said. Wind takes everything sooner or later. The deputy studied him, lips curling into a thin smile.
That's so.
He spat into the dirt, then nudged his horse closer. Mind if we look around? Can't be too careful with dangerous folk runnin' loose. Eli's eyes flicked to the man's badge, then to his hand resting near his revolver. You can look all you want, he said, but I'd start with the other side of the ridge. Ain't nothin' but pine and silence here. The deputy stared a moment longer, then shrugged.
Maybe.
He turned his horse, motioning to the others. If you see anything, you ride north to Clearwater. Sheriff'll pay good for news. Eli gave a nod, watching until they disappeared into the mist that still lingered beyond the pines. Only when the sound of hooves faded completely did he exhale. He stood a moment longer, listening, making sure the land was quiet again. Then he went back inside. Clara sat where he'd left her, hands pressed together, knuckles white. When he entered, she looked up, tears shining in her eyes. They weren't lawmen, she whispered. They wore badges, but they ain't law.